من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين.
I will start with, as Duarte said, introducing ourselves. So you can say your name, age, and if you're in uni or not, or grade you're in as well. So I'll start with myself. My name's Kamal Heather. I think a lot of you know me as well. So I'm in second year of uni right now, studying in RIT architecture. So if anyone wants to know about that, I'm here majority of the time. I've been in AMAFHH for like 4 years now, ish, close to it. Started same time as Ali as well. And yeah, that's me.
My name's Ali. I'm 15. I'm in year 10. I've been in AMAFHH since Kamal's been in AMAFHH. Yeah, that's it.
My name's Hamza. I'm 18, and I've been around the same time as these guys. And I'm studying at uni, first year.
My name is Abbas. I'm in year 9, and I study at Auburn High School. And I've been a month for since same time.
My name is Skizo. I'm 15 years old, and I'm a student at Mount Ridley College, and I study midterm.
My name is Mehdi. I am 11 years old and I study at Mount Ridley College. Too.
I'm Dua. I'm 21. I study law. I'm in my 4th year of uni.
I'm Shidi. I am 14 years old and I go to Sirius College.
My name is Issa. I'm 15 and I go to Sirius College.
My name's David. I'm 39 and I would probably keep studying all my life. And I work for the NDIS and have been volunteering with AMAFHH for about 6 or 7 years or so. And I'm the AMAFHH secretary as well.
My name is Isam. I'm 13 years old. I'm from Bangladesh and I have studied level 6 in Bangladesh.
Hello, my name is Hadi Jafri. I just started like last week. I'm very new. I'm year 7 right now. I'm 30 years old. 13. Yeah.
I'm Daniel Jafri. I am 11 years old. I study in Sirius College.
My name is Batul Gulani and I'm 54 years old. Everyone is saying their age. I'm the oldest one over here. The AMAFHH edition was my passion, and lucky that you youth are going to be the future of AMAFHH edition. So today, me and David is over here representing AMAFHH edition. Komel is a youth leader, and it's going to be, we are generating more leaders over here. So inshallah, this is our first meeting face-to-face after COVID, and we are going to continue this throughout the year.
My name is Ali Akbar, aka the video editor. I'm in year 11, currently progressing towards year 12, BCE, and yeah, that's it.
Jahana, your turn.
I'm Jahana Roaring. I'm 39 years old. I am from Bangladesh, and I have been doing human resource officer, but now I'm not doing here. I have 13 days before in Australia. So,
welcome to Australia.
Yeah, thank you.
So do you want to start with David's racism project? Yeah. Do you want to introduce that as well?
Okay, certainly. So the racism project, we're looking at racism from two sides. There are people who experience racism and there are people who might be at risk of committing racism. And sometimes it could be the same people, but generally racism happens across a divide where one group of people has more power than another group of people. So in Australia, the dominant group of people who's been here and got established and all of that is white people, like me. And we've sort of taken over a lot of the mechanisms through which power is exerted. We have a lot of control over things like government and corporation and things like that. And because of those things, if we treat people differently to the way we might treat ourselves, then that will mean that we have the power to discriminate. We have the power to create inequality. We have the power to create oppression if we choose to. Or if we do it because we don't actually realise we're doing it sometimes, but we might be doing it because we're ambitious, we're pursuing our own goals, we're trying to live our life in a way that achieves what we want it to achieve, and we don't necessarily know that other people might be suffering because of that. And even if we, as individuals, are doing the right things, even if we're doing the best possible things that we could be doing, we have privilege and we benefit from that privilege, which means that each one of us white people has a responsibility for racism, whether we like it or not. So even if we personally are not committing racism, still we're benefiting from it, so therefore it's our responsibility. So because of that, the Racism Project, we want to, yes, help other people who are from that non-white groups in Australia to understand what racism is and understand how it works, but we also want to help raise awareness among the white people about the effect that their lives have on other people. So the project includes both of those things. What we're doing now is we're trying to get your perspective so that we can understand your experience of racism, but we also will be trying to help you to understand the concepts of what racism is. That way you can be at least empowered to recognise racism where you see it and talk about it, and then hopefully your perspectives on it can be listened to by the broader society and understood by the broader society. So does anyone want to start? We'll go around the room and just tell us, what do you know about racism? What is one thing that you think you know about racism?
Should we just go this way now?
We can go this way. Did you want to go first?
No.
I think Brandon, whoever likes to answer.
Who wants to go first, and then we'll go anti-clockwise from there.
Ali.
Okay. So racism is when you treat someone badly, like in a different manner. Let's say, for example, Kumail's white, right? I'll treat him differently compared to treating someone else. Like that's racism because you're not equal with people.
That's more discrimination, which is one of the things that racism can manifest in. So discrimination is where you treat one person or group of people differently to how you treat another group of people. And one of the ways that racism can manifest, that's one of the parts of racism that you can see, is that act of discriminating. But that isn't all of racism, that's just one little way in which it can happen. Yeah, but you're right, that's a issue. But the other thing to consider is, he's white and you're not. He's the one with the power, or at least the privilege, or the potential power. So if you're treating him differently, it might be because you, as a person who is non-white, have been discriminated against more generally by the society, and you're rebelling against that by trying to hit back. And that's not racism. That's actually a response to racism. Well, the overall phenomenon is racism, but you're not actually being racist by trying to, fight back against it. So that's okay. Anyone else want to go next? Go for it.
Probably my definition of racism is when you treat a person differently based on his background, culture, or even race. So, yeah.
And again, treating someone differently is discrimination.
Right.
So the difference is, racism is this big phenomenon that's happening, and one of the ways that it happens is through discrimination, through treating people differently. But it's not the only way. Do you know any other way that it might be happening?
In Parliament, there are most of the white people are
Yeah.
getting the leading positions.
Okay, so we call that representation.
Representation of
Okay.
racism.
So how does representation work? You look at your TV, your mainstream news broadcasts, things like that, and you see people who are a certain way. Most of them might be white, most of them might be Christian, most of them might be middle-aged men. And then you look at yourself and you say, well, I'm not the same as them. Those people have the power to broadcast their message to everyone. Those people have their face shown everywhere on the advertising and the billboards and things like that. And I don't. Faces that look like mine aren't there. Maybe this might affect how we feel about ourselves. This might affect our confidence. And this might affect whether we believe that we can achieve what we want to achieve. And it might even be affecting the outcomes, because the expectation that somebody has, I'm a white person, I'm going to interview people for a job in media. I've already got an image in my mind of what I think the person who's going to fill that job looks like. I don't think, oh, I'm going to be racist, I'm going to choose somebody who's white, but I've got an image in my mind, I'm looking for that. So at a subconscious level, that situation is affecting me. So representation, just having a diversity of different faces showing in the media, in Parliament, and in the places where decisions are made, that all kind of has an effect, even if there's not a conscious decision for it to have an effect. It just has an effect on people psychologically. Representation is one of the other ways that racism can affect people. Yeah. Any others? Any other ways that racism can affect people? So we talked about discrimination, that's where somebody treats someone differently. We talked about representation, that's the faces we see and things like that.
My son also is afraid of his new school. If he can, maybe he's thinking, I can be faced that in my school.
So he's thinking about going to a school. If he saw the brochure for the school and he's flicking through the brochure and the brochure shows all white people, you might be thinking, oh, I don't know, am I going to fit in here? If he flicks through the brochure and he sees, oh, there's a Muslim person and there's a Sikh person and there's a black person and they're all different but they're all getting along together, then that might perhaps encourage him to think, wow, I could be part of that group, because everyone can be part of that group. So that's called inclusion or inclusivity, where you try to have groups that include different people and which represent themselves as inclusive and which show that everyone's welcome and things like that. So inclusion is a kind of anti-racism thing, something that resists racism.
So the idea to not like other people, I guess, to not create like groups and like certain like fractions within like society, and to like create like that.
Exactly.
I guess, yeah.
So one of, and this is a really important point, so one of the ways that racism works is fracturing people into different groups. In fact, the whole basis for racism is the idea that different groups of people, because of their characteristics, maybe it's skin colour, maybe it's language, maybe it's culture, maybe it's religion, maybe it's something else, because of those, the racism is the assumption that each of those groups of people is somehow different and is less human or not the same as my own group. Yes? You got your hand up?
Yeah, I think racism would be like defining a whole race or society by like their physical description or like personality traits or something.
Yeah. Defining people or stereotyping. This is a really key word. Okay? So stereotyping is where you look at some people as representatives of a group and you say, oh, that group's like that, and you generalise about the group. So for example, You might say, oh, I knew some Africans and they were very rude. Well, therefore you hold this view that Africans are rude. This is called a stereotype. Or another example might be, I knew an Asian person and they were short. So I have this view that Asian people are short. Well, I don't know, the average height seems to vary between different countries and different regions in Asia. It's all complicated. But generalising something about a group, this is called stereotyping. And this is another way that racism works. If you hold a stereotype, the stereotype starts off as one characteristic that you're generalising, but then people think about what the other characteristics are and they generalise other things. They generalise assumptions about what the people might be capable of, and then that will result in discrimination in the context of employment. Or they'll generalise what they think the people's attitudes might be like. This kind of thing. And this leads to all the other forms of discrimination. So yeah, stereotyping, really good point.
I think I've seen in as I'm getting older, like when you're applying for jobs and all that, when you write your names on your resume as well, like when they see like it's not a typical white person name, like they might avoid picking you, or without even seeing your face, just by looking at the name, like it's like something like Arabic or.
Well, that's not only something they might do. This is something that there's been research done about it, and there was a study about 2 or 3 years ago, which I'll look up and try to include in our information, where what they did was they had a group of HR professionals write some job applications, really good job applications, and as an experiment, they sent them to a lot of employers in response to job ads, and the only thing they changed was they had different groups. They had one group that they gave them all Arab names, one group that they gave them all East Asian names, like Chinese names and things, and one group that they gave Western style names, like Mike or John or whatever. And they ran statistics on what the outcomes were. Well, on average, if you had an East Asian name, like Chinese or that sort of thing, on average, you had to send about twice as many job applications before you got an interview compared to if you had a white-sounding name. And if you had an Arab name, it was more like 3 or 4 times as many. Yeah. So that's actual numbers. That has been measured, what you're talking about. That is a kind of discrimination, and it's a kind of discrimination that, researchers have actually been able to measure. So, a very real thing. And the thing is, when you interview the people who do the job interviewing, they'll say that they're really trying not to be racist. They'll say that. But yet, that outcome happens. Understanding why that is complicated. Could it be that they're lying and actually they're trying to discriminate? Could it be that they've just got these perceptions, stereotypes and things in their minds? So those things can affect how they perceive the people. Maybe both. Complex question. I don't know the answer. But it's something that people are really trying to look into and trying to understand. Yeah. The psychologists have a theory that maybe the instinct to recognise people who have similarity to us is a survival mechanism that we have, that maybe we've associated people being similar to us with safety in the past because of wars and maybe even a long time ago just different tribes and groups fighting against each other. We've had a sort of instinct to do that, maybe. So we don't know. But it might be conscious. It might be people just hiding the fact that they actually made a conscious decision that they don't like East Asian people or Arab people. We don't know. But I suppose there's another part of it, which is that a lot of the stereotyping comes from ignorance. People can genuinely believe something, which is really a wrong thing to believe, but they can believe it because they just don't know any better, because they're ignorant. They haven't had the experience. So an example of that would be, for example, my mother has a group of friends, they're artists, and they gather to do art together, and they're all white middle-aged women. And she was with her friends, and they were having lunch, and she told them that her son was a Muslim. And they all looked very confused. And they said, but he's not from the Middle East. Isn't he white? And they were kind of, they couldn't get their head around what that even meant. They didn't know what a Muslim was, really. They just, all they knew was pictures on the news or whatever they'd seen a little bit of. And I didn't look like the pictures, maybe. I've got a beard, but generally I don't look like the pictures. So that's a sort of level, especially in country areas, especially in small towns. So I grew up in a small town. I went to a primary school where there were 130 kids at the primary school. One of those kids, if I look at my school photos, I can say, oh, she was East Asian. She was, I think, Vietnamese. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't have any idea that she was different in any way, which she wasn't really, because she grew up in Australia. But she was from a Vietnamese family, I know that now. Didn't have any concept of that. But I never met a Muslim. I'd never met a person with brown skin in that town, because it was only 130 people. That was my sample of the Australian population. And then when I got older and I was a teenager, and we went for trips to Footscray, and I looked around and everyone looked a bit different. People didn't all look like they did in my town. I asked my parents, what's going on? That person's got a thing that covers her face. What does that mean? My mother said, that probably means she's from the Middle East somewhere. Where's the Middle East? All these questions. Always questions. And because of that, if I'd learned one thing about a group of people, and it was all I was told, I probably would have believed it, because I had nothing else to go by. So, yeah, ignorance is a big part of racism. The more people see of people from different groups, and the more people actually get to know you, the less likely it is that that ignorance aspect is going to stop. So that's why, a big part of addressing racism is overcoming that ignorance and having engagement between all the different groups in society. If that group of friends of my mother, if they came here and they met everyone in this room, they'd probably, after about 5 minutes, realise that you were all just people and start actually getting to know you and learning.
Have you guys seen the iceberg?
The iceberg
theory, where you judge people from the tip of the iceberg, and then you ignore the bottom bit. So when it comes to getting to know someone, you often ignore the bottom of the iceberg, which is under the water, and then you only focus your attention on the tip. So that's a really interesting way of connecting to people, I guess. I mean, that's a very superficial way of getting to know someone, but then it kind of reminds you that you sort of need to dig a bit deeper to actually get to know their values and their beliefs and their faith and stuff like that. So
100%, absolutely. And if you want to extend that analogy, not only getting to know an individual when all you know is their face and what they sound like or whatever. That's like that tip of that iceberg. But what about getting to know a group? What if you only know a couple of people from that group? What if your only encounter with them was not a very good encounter? What if the only time that you'd met a bunch of white people was when you were in the park and you happened to walk into the Reclaim Australia picnic? And maybe the people would have been really rude to you and judging you and things like that. And then you'd be like, wow, there's a lot of hate. Would you then think, oh, white people are like that? Maybe you would. And maybe it works the other way too. Maybe if the only encounter that they'd had with you was through the news broadcasts. Well, news is mostly about what's gone wrong in the world, honestly. Yeah. It's how stereotypes happen, and this is how people get this tiny little bit of knowledge, and it tends to be not the good bit. What's up?
Also, sometimes people would tend to, if they heard some sort of wrong news that wasn't actually true from someone that was like them, and they would usually believe it because they think this person, he's like me, who would tell me the truth and everything.
Yeah.
So they usually would believe the wrong news and wouldn't actually know what's right.
Exactly. What's the first thing that you do when you go into an unfamiliar situation with a group of your friends or your family? You might turn to your friends or your family and ask, what's going on? And you might believe them. You wouldn't believe the person you just met. Fair enough, but yeah, people trust their own group first. That happens. You all go to school. In your schools, are there people from different backgrounds? Like, yeah, okay. So when somebody is part of like a small group within a culture that decides to make its own identity and have its own identity markers and things like that, that's called generally a subculture. So, for example, punks are a subculture among white people.
Punks, you can say, like, they could be, so the essays originated, like, back in, like, 1980s. They were, like, more like an Adelaide thing.
Right.
And
I didn't know they went that far back. Okay, go on.
Yeah, and then it started, like, becoming more popular in, like, Sydney and stuff. Died in Adelaide, now it's coming towards Melbourne and Sydney.
Okay. Have you heard of goths?
Huh?
Have you heard of goths?
Yes.
He's heard of goths. That's another subculture. They go for a kind of gothic style where they have like really pale skin and they wear like black lipstick and.
So like pretty much like emos.
No, emos I think is like an offshoot of goths. I don't know how that worked exactly, but yeah, something like that. Those are subcultures. Those are examples of subcultures, and that's a bit different because there isn't a very long history of those. Racism tends to work over like a very long period of time, like hundreds or thousands of years. We've got different regions of the world that have different perceptions of each other, not because they just became like that straight away overnight, but because there's a really, really long history of relationships between those groups. So, for example, the Europeans, they've got a history of being colonisers. They've gone and colonised a lot of the world. The English as well. America was a colony. Australia was a colony. So those are former English colonies. And so our Aboriginal people, they were the people who were colonised. They've got like a really bad end of the deal. Like their rights. I don't know if you've heard of the Closing the Gap report. No? Every year they report on the status of Aboriginal communities in Australia. And they found that on average, the life expectancy of somebody who is born in an Aboriginal community is like half what a white Australian has. The expectation of getting an education is much lower. The expectation of being able to get decent health care, all of those things. So this is another way in which racism has manifest. There's the discrimination, that's what's happening now, but there's what we call institutionalised racism, where the whole structure of the society has been a certain way for so long that it's really hard to get it to change, and the groups that missed out have just permanently not got very good, not a good situation. What about the Middle East? So the Middle East has a history of resisting colonisation. It's got a history of colonial countries sending people to intervene and mess things up. So things like the British sending agents and trying to create conflict between different groups in the societies there. Things like the Americans doing that as well with the CIA. It's on the public record, all of this. I'm not being, too controversial. It's actually known historically that that there were policies to actually do this, and this has led to destabilisation. It's led to deliberate attempts to change the regime to make it more favourable to Western interests, and that's at a very broad scale. That's like a global scale, all of that. So all of that has an effect, and governments have very deliberately promoted racism. When you're going to when you're going to oppress a group of people, or you want to have control over a group of people, you need your people who are going to work as your soldiers and who are going to vote for you and support what you're going to do. You need them to see those people as other. You need to see them as different. And in order to do that, you need to have negative perceptions of them. If you go to the Immigration Museum, you can see old posters and newspaper ads and things like that about Chinese people. There's this kind of diagram of an octopus, and each of the tentacles is one of the things that they reckon the stereotypical Chinese person does. This is from back in the gold rush in the 1860s in Australia. There was this perception that the Chinese people were there to cheat everyone and that sort of thing. Whereas, in fact, they were needed, they were brought as workers and things like that originally. They joined the gold rush, they were looking for gold. But then they became a problem because the government suddenly, which was trying to create this outpost of Britain, suddenly had this other population to deal with apart from the Aboriginal people. Same with the so-called Afghan cameleers. So the people who camel traded across Central Australia, they were another group that was needed by the government. They were doing things that the white people couldn't do because the white people didn't know how to cross a desert. The explorers, Burke and Wills, they went out into the desert and died basically because they just didn't know how to look after themselves. But the cameleers, they were used to doing trade across deserts in the Middle East. They weren't all from Afghanistan, they were from various countries in that area, but they were just called the Gans or the Afghans because it's easier to have one word for people, and if you don't get to know people properly, you might as well just group them all together. That's easy. At the Premier's Iftar this year, there was a really good speech by somebody who was descended from one of them. She was half Afghan, half Aboriginal, and she showed us a newspaper article from early colonial Australia when they were building the telegraphs across Central Australia, which the camels did. In the newspaper article it said an Afghan was washing his feet at the bore. So the bore is like where they drill into the ground and get the water out. It's like the well. And the farmer came along and told him to stop washing his feet, and he didn't listen. Maybe he didn't speak English. So the farmer pushed him away from the waterfall. A scuffle broke out when several other Afghans walked up and joined him, and the farmer shot 2 of them and the rest ran away. And this was reported on the newspaper. It wasn't farmer murders 2 Afghans, it was just, well, a scuffle broke out and he had to shoot 2 of them. People weren't sort of, people weren't acknowledged as human unless they were white. This is the sort of history we're dealing with. So there's more to it than just the way people identify today, is what I'm trying to get at. There's probably shouldn't be going on social media during the event. Yeah, there's more to it than just the little bit that we see today of how we interact with each other. There's history, and we sort of need to understand and acknowledge that, but at the same time we've got to not be trapped by it, because if we allow the conflict from history to keep on going on, then there's no escape from it. You know what I mean? What's up?
I have a question, like maybe completely different from the current topic or something. So we believe and know that the Aboriginals were the original custodians of Australia, right?
We acknowledge this. They were here for 50,000 years or more.
Yeah. So have any of the any Aboriginal people been like someone in control, like a prime minister? And if they have, why or why not?
There should be a leader, someone running them.
There should be. There should be. The current parliament, there are 2 Aboriginal members of parliament, and there are 2 Muslim members of parliament, which is more than there's ever been before. There were never any. Representation we were talking about before. Is there enough representation of Aboriginal people? In terms of the population, there is, because you'd say Aboriginal people are a pretty small percentage of the population and they're represented in Parliament now. But in terms of their importance, the fact that this is actually their country that we've all moved in on, they should really be represented more, in my opinion.
Yeah, by like some sort of leader that actually has control over, like at least a little bit of control in Parliament House or something.
Yeah, look, they should be. I agree. And this new government is the first time that they've even had a vote in Parliament. Really, I think there was 1 in the previous government, but there are 2 now. So it's a pretty new thing. Have you got your hand up? No. Okay. But yeah, really good point. Muslims are represented in Parliament now too. There are 2 of us in there, which is a start. You know, I don't think that's been the case in the past. We are 2.5% of the Australian population, though. We're not a big percentage of the Australian population. So out of every 100 people here, 2.5 might be Muslims.
Wait, do you mean by like the Shia community or like Muslims in general?
Muslims combined altogether. And that's based on a figure that I knew about 10 years ago, so it might have increased, but still, I don't think it would have increased that much. It might be 3 or 4. Yeah.
It's still a lot compared to like if you're saying 100, there's like included in the Muslims like the other like Buddhists and like Christians, atheists. With that, 4 out of 100. I thought 10. Oh, sorry, my bad.
No. About 2 or 3 out of every 100 people would be Muslims.
Isn't it supposed to be like around 10% instead of 2.1?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think it'd be near 10%. No. I know it's growing. It is growing, but I don't think it'd be near that. I think if you look at our suburb, it'd be a big percentage. If you look at this local area, you'd say, yeah, big percentage of people are Muslims. And that's that's partly why we can have people in Parliament representing us, because there can be a suburb where most of the people are Muslim, and then most will probably vote for a Muslim representative. I think maybe 2 out of the Parliament, 2 out of the 150 members being Muslim is probably a pretty good start, considering that we're only that small percentage of the population.
It's 2.6% Muslims in Australia.
Oh, okay, cool. According to what?
Statistics.
Google.
Is that the ABS or?
According to Google, some website. University of South Australia.
Oh, okay, that's a pretty good source, yeah. You would think a university would do their research properly, so good. It's their job. Yeah. No, that's well spotted. Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, personally, I think we should have like a representative, like a mayor. We have like some places in America, we should have a mayor of like a whole group of people.
Well,
Like-
some of our towns have a mayor already. Yeah. You probably don't see them very often, but yeah, there's a mayor of Melton. I've met them. We have mayors. You get to vote in the local council election when you're an adult. Probably not you yet, but when you're an adult, you get to vote in the local council election, and you can vote for whoever you want to represent your area as the mayor. Racism can manifest in politics. Like, it's not only about representation. Sometimes racism gets used by politicians as a tool. Anyone know any examples about this?
There's one called like the White Australian policy back in like Alfred Deacon's time.
That's what-
That was like one that was used to stop the like immigration of non-European people.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that was like something like
That was a political policy, yeah, absolutely. And it was a political policy because people voted for governments that did it. What about more recently? More recently, well, you've heard of Pauline Hanson, maybe? No?
Yeah, the hijab lady in the thing. The one who wanted, like, the one who was hijab.
The one.
One Nation Party.
Yeah.
Isn't that the one who wanted?
Yeah. You're right. She in order to, I don't know, make some kind of political point, I don't know what her point was exactly, she went and wore was it hijab? Maybe a burqa when she went into the Parliament or the Senate. I don't know why she did that. She was trying to make some sort of point. Maybe she was waiting for them to ask her to remove it because they have to see her face or something. But, yeah. So the thing about her was that she was using racism as a way of getting attention. She was using racism as a way of saying, well, you people who are living in country Queensland, that was where she was from, you people are not being represented because your views are considered unacceptable by the mainstream society. Her views were, I don't like immigrants, basically. That was her view. And there were probably a lot of people in country Queensland at the time who had never seen an immigrant in their life, but were told by her, the immigrants are taking your jobs. This was a political tactic. So racism, yeah, it's not only being used by politicians, but it's also being promoted by politicians in some instances. So you get what racism is now, that it's more broad than just discrimination. It's not just about one person treating someone differently. There's more to it. There's always other facets. There's the history, there's representation, there's stereotyping, there's ignorance, and all of these things working together to mean that if you have certain identity markers because you come from a particular background, your life might not be as good as it might be if you didn't have them. I mean, your life might be great in a lot of ways, but you might face barriers. You might find it harder to get a job. You might find it more difficult to form friendships if you're like the only one from your group in school, because that happens to some people. I have a friend who grew up in Morwell. That's out in the Latrobe Valley, and in Morwell, my friend is Chinese, and she was the only Chinese kid at the school. She got bullied and called names, racist names and things like that, because people in Morwell had never seen a Chinese person, maybe except in a Chinese restaurant, and had some, weird stereotypes. So yeah, we're 2.5% of the population. We're a lot more in our own little areas, our own little suburbs, but for some people, if they're isolated, that can be a really, really serious problem. And it can lead to a lot of suffering. Has anyone here experienced a racially motivated attack before? No?
So like racism towards us?
Yeah.
Well,
has anyone been racist and teased you in a racist way, or no?
You could say so.
How do you mean?
No, I was with friends. It was we were like a group. We were just around. We're walking around the sunshine over there.
Right.
I get off the bus and then this old guy. He was looking at me for 20 seconds and I'm like, hello, and then he's like, "You Indian curry, go back to your country."
Yeah, see, that's a racist attack. Yeah, 100% it is.
I'm just standing there I could do so much, but I just stayed quiet because I'm a good kid.
Good kid.
Yes.
Good kid. Absolutely. He was probably.
He was old. I was like.
He's an old guy.
So you weren't.
So you weren't scared then. You didn't feel like he was going to hurt you or something.
I couldn't even understand what he was saying at first. He didn't have teeth as well. He was just speaking.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens. That happens. I think you were probably pretty safe that time. But not everyone is safe, because I think it was about a decade ago, about 10 years ago, there were a whole lot of attacks in Werribee area where some Indian students were going home from university or school, and some groups of white people actually just grabbed them and beat them up and stole their phones and stuff. And the white people were interviewed on the news and they said, "Oh yeah, people do that. It's called curry bashing." So yeah, it became quite a big problem back then. I think it's hopefully stopped now. I don't know.
I've seen it happen with Asians,
right.
They on trains and stuff. They get bashed and their things are taken from them.
That's bad.
People who are taking it, they've got weapons as well. They've got tasers and stuff.
You've actually seen this?
I've seen a video of it.
Okay. There are a lot of videos on the
There's
internet.
a lot of videos on in the Melbourne, the trains,
right.
Metros. The women who wear hijab,
yeah,
they face a lot of racism from other people. They say they abuse them because of wearing hijab and all.
There were a few cases of that in the news a few years ago. Does it happen more frequently than that? Do you know?
I don't think I've seen a recent one, but around 4 or 5 years ago, I've seen there was a news which was around that.
Yeah.
They increase the security nowadays on public transport.
That's true. That's true. They've got more police, they've got PSOs and things. Yeah.
Whenever you ride after hours kind of time, so I know that they are squatting those who are wearing hijab, the securities. So I feel safe. Though I was quite old enough to be afraid of something like that, but still I feel comfortable. When they saw that if there is someone who's wearing hijab, they try. The crime level is low because they increase the security.
Oh yeah, same around 2 years ago when we used to live in Craigieburn,
yeah.
There was 2 police officers riding on a horse around that Hume area, yeah.
Right.
They were looking everywhere for the Muslim families and all, trying to arrest them. Not arrest them, but go towards them, escort them.
like escort them, like
Escort,
protect them.
yeah, protect.
That's a bit better than arrest. Okay.
Yeah, but they increase the security of
They do.
public, like especially on train stations and things like that.
People start standing up for people, like for example.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like that.
If anything happens, it's not like people are like, wait, someone's getting beat up. They're not just gonna watch. They're gonna
Yeah.
go stop. They're gonna be like, hey, don't do that stuff.
People are standing up for people. That's really
If
true.
there's like
yeah.
one person being racist towards another person, but there would be like others who would be like, it would become 15 on one who's being racist towards that one person.
We hope so.
Somebody experienced over here something like that? Somebody protecting?
I've
somebody?
seen it happen a lot.
I've seen it online.
I've personally experienced once. A white person was saying something to me. He was asking about my faith or something. It was very but his voice was quite loud and rough. So a woman stand up. She was also white, and she comes too close to me and she said, "Are you alright?"
Yeah.
So I said, "Yeah." He was just asking me, and I was being very normal to him. That I didn't take it as an offensive. I took it like, okay, I can explain him if he want to know something about me. So I was replying to him gently, but this woman stood up, and I was very impressed with her.
Good on her.
And I told her,
Yeah.
thanks, but we are sorting it out, nothing like that. So I was quite impressed with that this woman stood up for me.
How about you guys? You guys all wear hijabs, right? Have you ever experienced anything like in a public place? Anyone treating you
Saw
differently or looking at you weird or anything? No?
I mean, like stares are quite common.
Stairs are
Like
common?
yeah, stares are like like everyday thing, I guess. But personally, I haven't. But I've had friends who have been like assaulted on like trains, and they do visibly look like Muslim. So yeah, I have like friends and like. And
Did they complain? Raise complaint?
I'm not too sure about that, but then they stopped taking like trains and trams and stuff, so that was quite unfortunate.
That's what
That
we
is
need to, yeah,
that's
that's
sad.
sad.
They have a right to access the
Yeah,
They have
society,
the right
but
to, they
they
should
shouldn't
feel safe taking trains.
Because once they make a
Transport,
complaint, lodge a complaint, psychological, they will feel more, that there is someone who can say, they can say to or they can approach to. So if something happens, next time, advise them to contact. Especially if there is a special department. Even you don't have to be, you can be unknown and lodge a complaint. That this incident happened in this area, suburb. Because most of the time the South Asian parents doesn't allow girls to lodge complaint. So that's why we raised this thing to the big police, and they just say that it could be an anonymous, just right area, so they can put more security over there.
Absolutely. So you can probably make a difference by doing that. But it's interesting to know that it's still happening and that you're hearing about it.
It starts in, if I can recall the memory, it's in 2001 when the incident 9/11 happened.
Yes, it was.
At that time it was the women who were wearing hijab was being more targeted. After that they did a lot of work, but still it comes under now the racism and discrimination. So we are working in a different, level. So instead of, okay.
Thank you guys all for coming. I know some of you guys had a long travel. We'll get you Hamza, bus as well. But inshallah we'll get these gatherings more so, inshallah. As well. And during Muharram's coming up as well, so we have a lot of events for that.